19. We're live? Okay, so we're live. All right, so what's tonight's class all about? Tonight's class is about medicine. And to be really frank, what motivated tonight's class a little bit to some degree is the ever-changing news about the different things that the medical practice is being used for, like killing babies, like mutilating people, even if it's self-ordered mutilation, like assisted suicide, and all kinds of other, at best, shall we say, dubious uses of medicine. So I thought it would be a good idea for us to focus together on medicine from a Torah perspective. How do Jews look at medicine? And then once we have an understanding of how Jews look at medicine, maybe we can understand what's going on in the world today, if it's good, bad, indifferent. What should our Torah perspective be? So Parshas Mishpatim deals with a lot of things. It's all about everyday life and the stuff that happens. And towards the end of the first reading, we talk about people fighting. That happens. We talk about people getting violent. It happens. It has to be dealt with. So the question is, if somebody assaults somebody else, what's supposed to unfold? What's supposed to follow from a Torah perspective? And the Torah tells us that if a person causes injury, then he has responsibilities. He has to make indemnification. Verse 19, following this assault, the Torah says that if this person actually bounces back, it's not a fatal blow, but he's harmed him and he's hurt him, v'niko hamake, and the assault is going to heal. So the Torah says, rak shivta yitain v'rapa yirapa. He has to pay for workers' comp, so to speak. The person is not able to work, he's not able to earn the money that he usually expects to earn, so you have to make that up. And you pay for his doctor's bills, v'rapa yirapa. So Rashi says, shivtai, what are we referring to when we speak about shivtai? If you were thinking that the word shivto shares a common root with Shabbat, you're right, it does. It means cessation of work. So shivtai, Rashi says, is bittul malachtai machmas acheli. This person wasn't able to work because he was ill, because you assaulted him. So you were the cause of his lost income. And Rashi goes on to talk what happens if the damage that was done was actually permanent damage. And what if this is a person who could earn their living in one way? Let's say they needed their hands or fine motor skills, and they don't have fingers that work anymore, or they don't have a hand. So, I mean, they get some kind of job, but not the kind of job, the skilled labor they had before. And this has to be analyzed and looked at. And we have to look at workers' comp, and Rashi talks about compensation, which is on a basic level, not necessarily what a person could have been making. And he talks about compensation that would have to be made. And he says that the final words of the first reading of Parshas Mishpatim, v'rapa yirape, should be understood kitargumo, as the Targum renders it. The Targum says, va'agar asya yishalim. The doctor's bills he shall pay. Yishalim schar harofe. So why is that such a novelty? Because if the person who caused the personal injury is himself a doctor, and he says, I'll heal you for free, the person could say, thanks, but no thanks. I want a specialist. I'll choose the doctor. You'll pay the bills. Or he can say, I got you a special discount doctor. This guy, he's amazing. He can heal you at half the price. No good. He says a person has the right to say, I want to go to the medical treatment that I want, and you, the one who caused the injury, has the responsibility to pay for that. There's an interesting Gemara in Bava Kama, which we'll talk about soon, that it says, Refuah b'chinam, shava chinam. That when they heal you for free, it's worth nothing.
You get what you pay.
You get what you pay for, right? This is a very old idea. So a person could say, I want to pay the doctor, I don't want any favors, and you have to pay. All right, fine. So on a literal level, the Torah is simply talking about responsibility, personal responsibility, indemnification. You harm somebody, you hurt somebody, you need now to deal with it. And that includes picking up the bills. Fine. But the Gemara reads into this something much, much more profound, something much deeper. This is not only, says the Gemara in Maseches Bava Kama on page 85, this is not only a discussion of whether somebody should pay for the doctor bills or somebody should be responsible for the injury they caused, but the Gemara says, Tana Dvei Rabbi Yishmael taught, Verapa Yirape, since the Torah says, Verapa Yirape in a redundant way, heal, he shall surely heal. Mikan, from this we can derive, Shenitna Reshus L'Roife L'Rafais, that the Torah gives permission to a doctor to heal. V'lo yamrinan, and we don't say, Rachamona Machi, God made somebody sick, Ve'ihu Masi, and he's going to heal him. As if God wants him to be healthy, God will make him healthy. There are such people who say things like this today. And it's not totally illogical, it's just wrong. How do we know? Because the Gemara says it's wrong. The understanding of the Gemara at a very simple level is that God created the world in a natural way and that we have a responsibility. And the responsibility that we have is to use natural means to overcome challenges and issues. There's a discussion between a person who came to Rabbi Akiva and he said, how could this be? If God wanted the person sick, why would you undo what God did? And Rabbi Akiva said, what do you do? And he said, I have an orchard. I work with my trees. And he says, you work on healing your trees? you feed the minerals? You prune the trees? Why don't you just say, whoever God wants the trees to grow, the trees will grow. So he said, if you take care of trees, how much more so you have to take care of people. So that's this idea that we learn that a person may actually bring about healing. This is a Torah concept. Healing is a Torah concept. So what's the question? So the question is, if I wouldn't have this Tana Devei Rabbi Yishmael, if we wouldn't have this exposition of Verapa Yirape, that the doctor shall surely heal, would we actually think it's prohibited to heal somebody? After all, the Gemara tells us that when we look at somebody who lost money, we have an obligation to restore that which they lost. It's called Hashavas Aveda. It's a mitzvah. So you have to restore his money, but not his health. It's self-understood. And the Gemara actually talks about this. The Gemara talks about the idea that restoring health is certainly at least as important as restoring residuals. So if the Gemara already tells us, and it's self-understood, that I have the ability to fix a situation or to assist somebody's fiduciary situation, somebody lost money, and I can restore that money to them, how much more so that somebody's health, which is much more important than money, should be able to be restored. And this is a question that is discussed at length amongst many, many of the Rishonim and the Achronim. And I want to share with you a sampling of some of the things that they say to give you what they call a little bit of perspective. But before we do this, let us note that when it comes to the creator of heaven and earth, he has many names. He has many names, God. And one of the names or titles that we use for God is Roifei Chol Basar, that God is the healer of all flesh. Which means that if a doctor claims to be a healer of flesh, he might think he's God. This is like a godly thing. The Torah does give this over, so to speak, in the hands of Hashem. And Torah calls God Reifei Chol Basar. So there's a very interesting Yalkutei Zevi who notes that whenever we have the concept of refuah, which is talked about in the hands of a doctor or people, it will always have the pei with a dot inside. So instead of spelling or sounding like the word fei, it sounds like the word pei. The pei has a hard sound and a soft sound. It says here, it doesn't say v'rafa yirafe, it says v'rapoi yirapei. So the Al Katoizevi says, Refuah al yedei adam hapei degusha. Whenever we have healing which is brought about by people, you're always going to have an emphasis on a hard pay. But if it's refuah al yedei HaKadosh Hashem Yisbarach, if it's refuah through the Holy One, blessed be He, the pay is refuah, the pay is soft. And the first place where God is called the healer is already in the Parsha 2 weeks ago, where we read in Parshas Beshalach, subsequent to the crossing of the Red Sea, Moshe Rabbeinu promises the people, after the bitter waters turn sweet, that God, Kal HaMachla Asher Samti Alecha B'Mitzrayim Le'asim Alecha, God says, all the illness or malaise which I placed upon you in Egypt, I will not place upon you. Ki ani Hashem Refecha, because I am God, your healer. So he doesn't say pay, over there it says fei. Okay, what's the difference? That's like a grammatical game if you say pay or fei. So Rabbeinu Bechaya also says something similar. He says it in a little bit longer, but he explains it. He says, Refuas Basar V'Dam, when it comes to healing of people, we do not find anywhere in the scripture Ki'im B'Dagesh. We always find it with an emphasis on the pay, not the fei. And he brings a number of examples. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's healing, he says, is always with a fei. For example, God is called in the book of Tehillim, Roifei L'Shvurei Lev, God who heals broken hearts. Or Erfa Meishaveisam. Or V'yirafei Holekim Esavi Melech. And Ani Hashem Refecha. So we see a number of different verses that allude to God as the healer, and there it's always a soft pay. Rabbeinu Bechaya explains, Hatam Bazeh, the reason that there's a difference between the hard or soft pronunciations is Harafua B'Basar V'Dam Eini Ela Al Yedei Tzar. When you take medicine or go through a procedure to be healed, there's always pain that comes along with it. One wise person once told me, what is the meaning of a side effect? What makes this a primary effect, and what makes that a side effect? Really and truly nothing. It's arbitrary. The doctor who wants to heal you has pharmacology that can do something good for you. It can also do other things for you. So they call the thing that they want to happen the effect, and the thing they don't want to happen, they call it the side effect. But that's just verbiage. That's just words they're using. In other words, we don't have the ability to create perfect drugs. So the drugs and the body is so complicated that the drugs which serve as inhibitors, or sometimes things which enrage the body and get the body to do certain things artificially, invariably will have a host of different effects. Some of them will be intended, and some of them unintended. Most of the time that people have to deal with situations, when you have a triage situation and you have no choice, you have to deal, so there's always going to be pros and cons. And we make a decision. You have to pay the price. Just about everything in life has a price to pay. You cannot have it all. As they say, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If somebody is ill, he has to get healed. If he doesn't get healed, he's going to be in trouble. Is there a price to pay? Sure there is. Stress, anxiety, pain, side effects, which are just effects. So this always happens al yedei tsar v'teirach. V'hu sheyisbail hasam v'hamashka hamar. The person has to be able to suffer the consequences of the herb, which in today's day and age we call drug or pharmacology, or the bitter taste of medicine, which could be understood not only as taste, but also the bitter effects of medicine. Today pharmacology is so complicated that oftentimes the doctors are literally in a juggling act between different drugs that do different things. And they're trying to juggle to make sure that one doesn't counterbalance or serve as a counterweight to the other. Aval Refuas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, says Rabbeinu Bechaya, the healing of God is benachas. It's soft. It's peaceful. Ein Shem Tsar. I mean, God's the creator. So he simply pulls the negativity. And once Hashem pulls the negativity, this is what we would call, I suppose, holistic healing. Holistic healing is when the body has the ability, or marshals the ability, to heal itself. And in a holistic way, there is no pain. There is no foreign invasion of a substance or an implement or something which is painful for the body, because the body is actually healing itself. But the body, nothing does itself. It all comes from Hashem. So Hashem created the body. He created the body's ability to heal itself. Everything is in the hands of Hashem at all time. Even the growth of a blade of grass is directly linked to a spiritual reality. So the fact that the body could heal itself, which we see as God healing, this is something which would happen benachas. That's something that happens in the sense of peace and equanimity, without the pain, without the suffering, without the challenge. And that's reflected in the grammar of the Torah, where it's Ani Hashem Roifecha, or V'rapoi Yirape. So the Rape Yirape is no simple thing, and therefore when people are going to heal, so there's always going to be the difficult side that comes along with it. So the Tosfos asked the question, we know this because you're allowed to restore a lost item to somebody. Wouldn't it be obvious that a person could restore somebody's health? So the Tosfos gives a number of answers. One answer, he says, if somebody lost an item, you restore the item. That's like basically one act. It's a simple frame. Item lost, item restored. It's very rare that when it comes to healing, something's lost and something's restored. Healing is a process. It's a procedure. And oftentimes, it's a number of different things that take place over an extended period of time. There's a convalescing, there's a healing, there's a getting back to oneself, there's many, many stages in healing. And as such, one might think that when it comes to an act, we're required to do an act of restoration. But when it comes to not one act, but when it comes to an entire process, which can unfold over months or even years, that's already something which, that's not something which is in our hands, or Hashem has expectation of us. And the Tosfos says that's the chiddush, that's the novelty of the words v'rapa yirape. Hashem says not only should you restore, somebody dropped the wallet, you bring him back his wallet. It's an act. Not only you should do an act of restoration, but if a person is able to engage in long-term restoration, restoring ultimately through many, many, many procedures, through a long and painful journey, but bringing somebody's health back, that would be a Torah thing to do, and Hashem, so to speak, encourages it. Another answer that's given is, this is the answer of the Tur and some of the other Rishonim. If you see a lost item, are you allowed to charge to restore it? The answer is no. If he gives you a reward, you can take it. But you can't say, I'll give you back your item if you pay me for it. Because it's a mitzvah. And we're not really allowed to charge to do a mitzvah. There's a whole discussion about teaching Torah and getting paid for it. And you can't do it. People get paid, they get paid for not doing something else. So to speak, a person would devote himself to one thing, so we say you're getting paid to be able to wean yourself off or remove yourself from other activities so you can be focused on this. But the notion of being paid to do a mitzvah is problematic. So is a doctor allowed to get paid? Or does he have to work for free? So the Torah says that's the meaning of v'rape yirape. The restoration of something which somebody would do for somebody else, that's for free. But the notion of dedicating your life to healing, which is not an act, somebody dropped a wallet and you give it back to them, but actually you're going through a process and doing all kinds of things. It's a vocation. It takes up a person's entire day. It can take up a person's entire life. So the Torah is telling us, v'rapa yirape, that it's something we can be paid for. And this actually links into the literal pshat, where on the literal level, v'rapa yirape, Rashi says, look in the Targum. Targum says, pay his doctor bills. So if the Torah is saying you have to pay the bills, obviously it's permissible for the person to get paid for what they're doing. There is another approach, and this comes from a collection of Tosafos writings called Moshe's Kenim, and that is that one might think of differentiating between illness that comes naturally or injury that's inflicted. So if one person inflicted an injury, another person should try to heal the injury that was inflicted, because that's what we would call a human disaster, a man-made disaster. But when it comes in illness, it doesn't come because somebody did something, but illness just comes from, you don't know where it comes from sometimes. It comes from Hashem. When an illness comes from Hashem, there would think that's got to back off. It's God's business. If he wants to make somebody ill, he makes somebody ill. He wants to heal them. We have no right to intervene. The intervention would be an act of faithlessness. So the Moshe's Kenim says that's why we have, in addition to the notion of restoring something which is lost, which you might think is only by an inflicted disaster, we are told that even if Hashem makes somebody sick, Hashem also gives somebody else the possibility of healing them. And this is perhaps goes along the lines of tzedakah, where if there's a famous question that was asked to the sages, that if God didn't want poor people, why did he make them? He should have made everybody wealthy, and then you wouldn't have any issues. And the response is that Hashem created situations where somebody needs help in order to allow other people the privilege of being able to help them. So just as the wealthy person is actually able to give tzedakah and provide to somebody he doesn't have, the doctor has the opportunity to provide for somebody who has malaise or a lack of their health. There's a Rambam in his commentary on Mishnayos, in Maseches Nedarim. It's found in chapter 4, the 4th Mishnah. So let me give you some background on Nedarim so you appreciate and understand what I'm about to tell you now. A neder is a vow, means a verbal commitment. And from a Torah perspective, if a person makes a verbal commitment, then they're biblically obligated to follow through with whatever they said they would do or not do. So for example, if a person would say, I make a vow, I will not eat bread tomorrow, then eating the bread tomorrow is as bad as eating pork. Both are biblically prohibited. Even though God didn't prohibit that, even though you created that prohibition, but when you use your words, then you're not allowed to violate them. And that's the concept of keeping a neder. So what happens if a person makes a vow or a neder that he or she won't do a mitzvah? They make a vow that they won't eat matzah on Pesach. Are they allowed to eat matzah? They made a vow. If they made a vow, it's prohibited. So the halacha is that you cannot make vows like that because you're already obligated. You cannot make a vow. Your vow is not going to stick. It can only stick where you have an area of freedom. But in an area where the Torah already legislated or obligated you to do certain things, so over there the vow is meaningless. And here it gets interesting. Suppose two people have a dispute and they're very, very upset at each other. And one vows, I will never benefit from you again for the rest of my life. I want nothing from you. Maybe you've seen disputes like this. Maybe you could imagine people flying off the handle. I want nothing from you. Makes a vow. The halacha is they're actually not allowed to benefit each other. It's a huge issue. If there's communal institutions and everybody in the community has a stake in them, both of them might be prohibited from using the communal institution because they're benefiting from somebody else. It gets so detailed and so tricky that there's even a discussion of going into a small swimming pool together, where people in the pool warm up the pool, not because they're adding anything into the pool, just because there's body heat, right? So here somebody is benefiting off the body heat of another person. That would be a problem. Just to show you how detailed it gets. So the Mishnah in the Nedarim asked the question, if somebody makes a vow that he will not benefit from somebody else, and that other person happens to be a doctor, and then the person gets sick, or there's an injury, is the doctor allowed to heal him? Or is he violating the mitzvah of Nedarim in doing so? So the Rambam says, healing is a mitzvah. It's not an elective, it's mandatory. And because healing is a mitzvah and it's mandatory, which is not any different than restoring a lost item, so therefore the person who's a doctor, even though the other one made a vow not to benefit from them per se, the benefit or the lack of benefit doesn't encroach in the area of a mitzvah. And because of this, the doctor would be allowed to do what a doctor does. Now, this person might benefit because he's getting paid to do his whatever he's doing. So we structure this very carefully. If the person doesn't pay the bill, then he benefited. If the person gets the money, then the other doctor benefited. So what should they do? The person who was healed should pay, and the person who healed shouldn't take the money. It should go to tzedakah. And in that way, nobody, so to speak, benefited. The person didn't benefit because the doctor didn't make money off what he or she was doing, and the person who was healed didn't get it for free because they couldn't charge. The point that I'm making to you is that the Rambam uses the verbiage of saying that it is actually a mitzvah, he says, and because it's a mitzvah, the neder, the vow, cannot take root. So, with this in mind, with this idea of the v'rapa yirape and the notion that a person has to heal, and the notion that a person is actually doing a mitzvah when they heal. I'm missing a book. Oh, I'm lucky I might. It's right here.
So, Rabbi, if a person calls themselves a saying bli neder.
Oh, bli neder is not a vow. That's not what we're learning about tonight, really. But it's very detailed and it's a complicated subject, the subject of vows. But the idea of bli neder is that what I'm about to say now will not be binding from a perspective of a vow.
So it excuses you.
It doesn't allow the vow to take root to begin with. It stops the vow. So the Rebbe once talked about this, and he brings the famous question that we have this idea that we learn about healing because of Hashavas Aveda, because of restoring a lost item, and the Rambam talking about the language that it's a mitzvah, and the Rambam doesn't quote Virapa Yirape, he quotes the idea of restoring a lost item. In which case, so why would we need the additional Virapa Yirape, the pasuk in Parsha Mishpatim, which seems to teach us about healing? And the Rebbe said something very interesting. Let's talk about lost items. Are you obligated to look for lost items? You're not. When does the obligation of returning a lost item begin?
Once you found it.
If you happen to be in that situation. But you're not required to put yourself in that situation. Even though it's true that there was one tribe that followed along at the caboose when the Jewish people moved through the desert, the tribe of Dan. And we say the tribe of Dan, that they had the ability to restore everything that was lost to people. They did the final sweep, and they would restore the lost items. But again, Providence placed them at the caboose, so they should do the final sweep. That was the job they got. But a person is not obligated, per se, to put themselves in a situation where they should be able to restore a lost item. Rather, if you happen to be in that situation, then that's what you should do. So the Rebbe said, this is the key to understanding the additional verse of Virapa Yirape and why what the Torah is saying is not redundant. If somebody went to medical school and they're a doctor and they can heal and somebody got sick, what's their obligation? To heal. In fact, if a doctor drives by an accident scene and he can't be bothered because he's going fishing and he's meeting his buddies, and later it's discovered that a doctor drove by the scene and didn't stop, he could actually lose his license. I'm pretty sure that constitutes a crime. Because once you have the medical know-how, you have a certain obligation that comes along with it. This is connected to the Hippocratic Oath as they speak. And this is a responsibility. If a doctor is a doctor, you have a responsibility. You're sitting on the plane and something goes wrong, and doctors say, I'm too tired, I can't be bothered now. I didn't sleep yet. Any doctor here? Guys, I didn't hear anything. You could actually get yourself into big trouble. Yeah, you'd have to prove you didn't hear, you weren't aware. Very not simple.
I flew on one of those. There were several doctors, and none of them got out.
Okay, that doesn't mean they did the right thing. And it doesn't mean they couldn't have been sued. And it doesn't mean they couldn't be have the criminal code facing them. The point then would be, is if you happen to be a doctor already, that you have this responsibility. But here's the question. Is it a mitzvah to become a doctor? Is it a mitzvah to put yourself in a situation where you actually will be able to heal people should they become ill? Right now you don't have that ability. Is it praiseworthy? Is it laudatory? Is it appropriate?
It's a privilege.
Huh?
It's a privilege.
The Rebbe suggests that from the pasuk Virapa Yirape, Mikan Nitan Rishus, from here the Torah is giving a clear permission to go ahead and do this.
Permission, but not requirement.
Permission is not so simple, Ami. You see, the Torah doesn't give us permission to do all kinds of things. You're supposed to live a meaningful life and a focused life and a purposeful life, which for a Jew is supposed to be learning Torah. That's supposed to be our primary pursuit. So ask you a simple question. A yeshiva bacher decides he wants to become a physician. I have a number of friends from yeshiva who became doctors. So if he decided he wanted to become a doctor, does he have the right to pick himself up, leave the yeshiva, and become a doctor? The answer is yes. And where do you know it from? The Rebbe says from Virapa Yirape. Because if a person not only already has the medical know-how, But if a person decides that he or she is suited to be a doctor and they have the motivation to go ahead and do this, then it would actually be the appropriate thing to do. Mikan nitan reshus. It doesn't just mean you can. Don't tell me about it. It means it's the appropriate thing to do. Becoming a doctor is an appropriate thing to do. It's a praiseworthy thing to do. And historically, the Jewish people have always seen very talented and capable people go into the field of medicine. And I'll share with you some details before we go on into the technicalities of what we're talking. I will share with you details that, first of all, in the Beis HaMikdash, there was always a number of doctors on call. This is similar to the notion of a sports team. All sports teams have an official doctor. Why? Because the bodies of the players are under tremendous trauma. It's not easy to get beat up on the ice or to get smacked around on the football field. People can't even do this past 30 or 35. It's a difficult life. Even baseball, which is a tamer sport, it's not simple. These guys have torn ligaments and muscles that are really busted up. So they have an official sports team, and the sports doctor, his job is to be there to heal the players. So the Gemara in Maseches Shkalim tells us that in the Beis HaMikdash, the Kohanim had a sacred duty, and that was to bring the offerings, the korbanot, and they also had a duty to eat the korbanot. And it says, Kohanim oichlim, the Kohanim eat, ubaylim eskaprim, and the people who performed inappropriate things like a sin and had to bring a korban, the Kohen would eat, and that would bring atonement for the person who brought the korban. So the Gemara says, okay, so you mean to tell me that the Kohanim, when they're serving in the Beis HaMikdash, they're eating a lot of meat? Yeah. And what are they drinking? Nothing but water. They couldn't drink anything stronger than water. They couldn't use any. Wine is absolutely prohibited. And how about the weather? Well, gets cold in Jerusalem, and they were barefoot on a freezing floor. So the Gemara in Shkalim says that very often they would have issues, digestive issues. You get thrown into the situation where all day you're running around on a cold floor in the chill of winter, eating a lot of meat and drinking only water. It could get to you. So there was a special person who was called Ben Achia, and his job was to take care of Cholim Ma'ayim, take care of the issues. There was constipation issues and the other way, and he was figure out what each one needs. So this is really going back to antiquity, going back to the time of the Beit HaMikdash, going back to the first Beit HaMikdash 3,000 years ago almost, and there was a doctor on call. Incidentally, there were no secular Jews in those days. Everybody was observant once upon a time. I mean, people went south. They served idols, unfortunately. But as a rule, the people in the Beis HaMikdash were all devout Jews. So we have evidence of devout Jews, or Kohanim, being involved in the medical profession already thousands of years ago. The Gemara tells us that one of the great sages, his name was Shmuel, Rav and Shmuel,